Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. A provocative new piece at the Wall Street Journal asks if income equality and not income inequality is the real problem. The authors of the piece acknowledge that such a proposition is contrary to conventional wisdom, which tells us the big boogeyman is income inequality. Yet the current political realignments, of which President Trump was a harbinger for, seem to make the case for it. Recall that for so long we've been told by the GOP establishment that the secret sauce to winning is to be fiscally conservative yet socially liberal. Not only is that a losing combination, it's also given us the worst of both worlds, with wages stagnating, supply chains being shipped out to third world countries, while American workers are being replaced at home by foreigners who will work for less. And we still get drag queens in our schools, with our kids made to read pornographic material in their library. Plus, for all their bootstrap talk, Republicans in Congress sure are happy to spend pretty much just as much as Democrats, maybe minus a few billion, just to their constituents instead, like the big corporations who hate our guts. So what did President Trump do differently? He went hard on a message of social conservatism and economic protectionism, such as tariffs and renegotiating trade deals and worker visas to our benefit. It was enough to make the Chamber of Commerce type Republicans plot his demise along with the left. With that in mind, what this article argues specifically is that the bottom 60% of American income earners are largely equal, regardless of employment status, because of so many wealth transfers in the form of welfare-type benefits and other bonuses handed out since LBJ declared a war on poverty. Quote, in 2017, among working-age households, the bottom 20% earned only $6,941 on average, and only 36% were employed. But after transfer payments and taxes, those households had an average income of $48,000. The average working-age household in the second quintile earned $31,811, and 85% of them were employed. But after transfers and taxes, they had income of $50,000, a mere 3.5% more than the bottom quintile. The middle quintile earned around $66,000, and 92% were employed. But after taxes and transfers, they kept only $61,000, just 26% more than the bottom quintile. Now, the blockbuster finding is that on a per capita basis, the average bottom quintile household received 14% more income than the average second quintile household, and 3.3% more than the average middle income household, end quote. This leaves many people who are working hard for the same standard of living that their neighbors on handouts are getting, feeling like, well, what's the point of work? Once again, reading from the article, quote, given the surge in transfer payments since the war on poverty, it isn't surprising that the percentage of working-age people in the bottom quintile who actually worked plummeted from 68% in 1967 to 36% in 2017, end quote. In short, less working-age people are actually working. According to figures compiled from government statistics in this Compact magazine article, quote, the labor force participation rate of American male workers aged 25 to 54, precisely the demographic most in need of employment in the Republic of Work, is 88.6%, a figure below pre-pandemic levels, nearly 3% under rates prior to the Great Recession, and a remarkable 9% lower than in the 1950s, end quote. So how should this affect conservative messaging moving forward? Saurabh Sharma, the president of American Moment, joins us now to discuss. Thanks for being here tonight, Saurabh.
It's my pleasure, Kara.
Great. So basically, we're told we just need to work harder to get ahead, and while that still remains true to a degree, should we also be honest that a lot of people who don't work are living the same kind of lifestyle because of government handouts, and those at the top are also secure because of corporate handouts from the government and the rules and regulations they get to put into place through their buddies in the government? So all at the working and middle class man's expense. So does the GOP ignore this anger with work to its own detriment, in other words?
It's a great question, Kara, and the best framework that I've come up with in order to describe the problem we have with the modern American economy is that it's basically a war on normal people, normal middle-class families that just want to, work hard at their job, raise some kids, send them off to get a good education, and then get a good job. Every aspect of our economy is structured from the bottom up to go after those people and make sure they have the rawest deal imaginable. So at the very top, who protects the richest people in America? Usually the Republican Party and the cronyists in the Democratic Party. There's plenty of bailouts, protection, corporate subsidies, favorable regulation, and so on for them from the right. And then when it comes to the bottom income quintiles, you have the Democratic Party that recognizes that it's relatively affordable to buy votes, and they create a unfair playing field where it doesn't really make sense to a middle class person why they should actively try as hard as their parents did when they could get basically the same result by doing the same thing that people who don't work at all or do anything at all do. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have some level of a basic welfare system that protects people who are down on their luck. That's the old Republican Party that used to look down on those people. However, it does mean that we need to take a serious look at actually having an economy and a political movement in this country that rewards middle class families that are just trying to do the right thing, as opposed to constantly advocating for policy that hurts them.
I think that's exactly right. And I think this is a time for the GOP to really shine. I mean, we're trying to rebrand ourselves now as the party of the working man. Democrats used to try and hold that title for so long, but you see that political realignment. But I think it starts with being honest that a lot of people feel like, well, wages have been stagnating, especially, people get paid pennies basically, and then they're expected to buy these, houses that are, going for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point, can't keep up with inflation. A lot of people right now are really feeling the squeeze. So with all of this that people are feeling, do you think that the GOP really needs to finally move away from the idea of let's forget the culture war, socially liberal, yeah, that's fine, maybe they'll throw a few buzzwords out there about God, but mostly ignore the culture war. But, this idea of fiscal conservatism that they've had for a while. Is it time that we rethink it in the vein of what, say, President Trump put on the table?
Absolutely. And you know what I like to say, Kara, is that there are no social issues. Everything's a social issue. Everything's an economic issue. All these things are intimately tied together. And here's what I mean by that. For instance, when it comes to college, one of the biggest sucks on people's ability to earn a middle class living because of all the debt they take on, the years out of the workforce they spend. Well, who tells people that college is absolutely essential in order to join the middle class? Well, some of it's our cultural milieu that tells us that you're a dumb yokel if you don't actually go to college. I fundamentally disagree with that, and the Republican Party should champion the values of people who decide that going to college isn't right for them. But then on the other side of it, there is economic incentives that come with this, right? And economy that basically makes it so that if you don't have a bachelor's degree, you don't even get a second look when it comes to the vast majority of jobs. And so there has to be both a cultural element and an economic analysis of every single one of these issues. And you'll find that the establishment in both parties love to use culture war issues and economic issues in different ways in order to divide middle class regular people who just want to earn a stable living, because that's how they enrich themselves and keep their political constituencies managed.
And you bring up, so of course big thing in the news lately is Biden and the announcement about the student debt forgiveness up to $10,000 or even $20,000, depending on the type of loans that were taken out and depending on the household income. I know a lot of ink has been spilled on this. A lot of people have talked a lot about it. And of course, in many ways, it is yet another wealth transfer, to the liberal laptop working elite class that we see, building and solidifying itself. But there's still the other side, though, to this paradigm. And I was wondering if you could talk about this, because for so long we were all expecting, a massive red wave in November, but it seems that is slowly eroding. Who knows what November is really going to look like at this point. And I think this is actually going to play well for voters. And I know a lot of people say, no, it's not, but I think it is. And I think for one reason is because Republicans and Democrats both spend a lot of money, both screw over everyone long term, but at least in short term, the Democrats at least pretend to care about their voters. They give them little, crumbs, as Nancy Pelosi once said, here and there, but the Republican Party doesn't do that. And voters are responsive to that, especially a lot of independents who could be swayed. Do you think that perhaps Republicans, if we don't get our messaging right on this, might actually be blowing a chance here?
Absolutely, because while the Joe Biden administration passes trillions of dollars in new legislation designed to reward key aspects of its constituency, all wrapped in what is, in a lot of cases, kind of faux populist rhetoric, but populist rhetoric regardless. What is it that the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. is focused on? A lot of them seem to be running on things like Ukraine. You had many Republican leaders in the House and Senate earlier this year saying that their number one focus when it came to their legislative agenda and what they were spending their time on was Ukraine. That's during an era of skyrocketing inflation. Meanwhile, you have what are often called quote unquote culture war issues like crime and immigration that are being completely abandoned. And in fact, Republican leaders often chastise candidates trying to run on popular issues of law and order and culture and these bread and butter tableside issues as well, because that isn't part of their messaging plan. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this red wave gets attenuated unless some of this messaging starts to turn around. Thankfully, we do have some exciting candidates that are running on a more interesting message, on a more populist message, on a more nationalist message this cycle. But the entire Republican Party needs to get with the program on it. Otherwise, our gains are going to be very limited. And ultimately, no one's going to be to blame other than weak Republican leadership.
I think perhaps the takeaway here is that the middle class, the movers and shakers of this nation, the people bringing home the bread, if you will, we're the ones, our backs are being broken right now to pay, people higher than us and people both lower than us on the scale. And both, of course, the government elites and, of course, redistributing our wealth away from us. COVID-19 with the pandemic, that was a major factor in a lot of this to kind of revitalize those efforts from those elites. But it's time for us, especially Republicans, to take this opportunity to reinvest in us, reinvest in America's workers, to reinvest in families, and to start putting forward into investing and putting money where their mouths have been. Like I said, family, God, and everything else. So perhaps this might be that time, because us middle class people, we're getting sick of it. We're really sick of having to foot the bill for everyone and being told, just pick yourselves up by the bootstraps. Like everyone else who are, getting everything by daddy government. But Saurabh, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.